hide it. The thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
And here's why. It's not like Sarah Boone is sitting on an island sipping Mai Tais, awaiting her trial and just trying to push and delay the ball so she can continue her vacation. She's in custody, right? So it's not like there's any difference. You know, she's either guilty or she's not. If she's guilty, she's already basically serving a sentence of a person who's guilty of this, right? Giving her an attorney, especially when an attorney has showed up for four times and is filing motions, it has all the upsides for the judge. Judge doesn't want to have Sarah Boone defend herself and turn this case into a circus and then, come back on appeal and say, well, I had an attorney. You didn't let me have an attorney. No, the judge wants her to have an attorney and lose the right way, right? And this.
Okay, so Sarah Boone, she is now into her 9th attorney, if you can believe that. The tea leaves aren't looking very good for her. You've just heard from this attorney on court TV basically saying, if she's going to lose, she needs to lose the right way. It does look very likely that she's going to lose. This is actually a case that looks like voluntary manslaughter. We'll talk about that in a moment. We're also going to deal with Madeline Soto briefly, and then the Bayesian, the Bayesian Superyacht in a bit more detail, probably a lot more detail than some of you would like. And then we're going to do something intertextual with Jay Slater, and then we'll end off with, we'll touch on Scott Peterson, just really referring to this book and the theory that was put in this book in terms of how Scott committed this crime. And it's from his half-sister. And then we'll end off with Paul Gauguin, assuming my voice is still here and you guys are still here and we don't get too carried away on any of the other cases. So let's listen into a little bit more of what they're saying about Sarah Boone. Good to see you guys. Tanny, Vincent, thanks very much. Yeah, 9th attorney, can you believe it?
By the way, this case is an imminently winnable case. Not winnable in terms of Sarah Boone is going to walk out and get a not guilty, but winnable in terms of it could be dropped down to voluntary manslaughter. I mean, this has voluntary manslaughter written all over it, right?
So,
right?
Do you guys know what voluntary manslaughter is as opposed to involuntary manslaughter? So if you look at the Bayesian Superyacht, that's looking like it could be manslaughter. If you look at the Rust incident, manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. What is voluntary manslaughter? Do any of you guys know? Anyone here know what voluntary manslaughter is? And so if you don't know the Sarah Boone case, it's a case that played out in 2020. Sarah and her boyfriend were apparently, according to her, playing a game of hide and seek. These are adults. And he ended up in a suitcase, and the suitcase was closed. And she took a video of him pleading for his life, and he ultimately died because she didn't let him out of the suitcase. One thing I would like to know is, how did he end up in the suitcase? Did he climb into the suitcase himself? Did she put him in the suitcase? That part is certainly not all that clear. Lisa says, I guess when you ignore someone's pleas for help. Oh yes, that's very good. Angel's piece of peace says, isn't it when it's a crime of passion? So here's the definition. Voluntary manslaughter is the killing of a human being in which the offender acted during the heat of passion under circumstances that would cause a reasonable person to become emotionally or mentally disturbed, right? And so that could be what we're dealing with here. Can you guys read that? Okay.
So, an attorney could really do right by Sarah Boone and the system and make even the judge happy. So she should have an attorney. If she doesn't fire this attorney, great. If she fires this attorney, honestly, for some reason, I feel like if the judge allows Sarah Boone to postpone her trial, have her attorney, and then she fires this attorney, I think she's done no matter. I don't care if the Supreme Court justice retires and wants to defend Sarah Boone. At that point, the judge is going to tell her you're done.
Yeah.
Okay, so in a way, the Sarah Boone case is sort of the wet dream of legal cases. It's basically where crime is committed on camera. So it's kind of a situation where you can say, there's no mystery here. You've got a recording of the crime. What more is there to look into? And so I think that's in a way why this case is fairly open and shut. If any of you have listened to or watched that recording that she made, it's quite traumatizing. I mean, it's literally, you can't see him, you just see a suitcase, and you hear this person trying to reason in the last moments of his life, trying to reason with Sarah, please let me out, I really can't breathe. And she thinks it's a joke and she doesn't take it seriously, and then he dies. And it is pretty shocking. It's pretty brutal. It's definitely pretty brutal. And it's not every day that you see someone recording themselves committing a crime, which makes this perpetrator pretty special, and I don't mean that as a compliment. Okay, so are you guys ready for us to go on to Madeline Soto? I just want to have a quick look at what you guys have voted for. Please do vote if you haven't already. What case are you guys the most interested in? Let's have a look. Please vote if you haven't already. So most of you say Madeline Soto, and the rest falls off pretty precipitously. Okay, so I must be one of the only YouTube channels that I've monitored that didn't cover Madeline Soto. And I'm not going to cover her in much detail now. But we are going to just deal with a fragment of Jen Soto's police interview. So let's bring that up.
They also diagnosed her at the same time with autism.
Can you guys hear? It's not very loud in my audio, but I think if you just put your earphones in or turn the volume up, you should be able to hear.
So she's had an autism diagnosis for a few years now. I've reassessed her recently. They told me she had some autistic traits, but they weren't sure if she was autistic.
So, I mean, do you ever notice her mental capacity impacting her ability to, I guess, be around other kids or function normally?
I would say sometimes, because she acts... I'm not sure. Sometimes she'll make some decisions that I'm just like, where did that come from? Like,
I mean, would that be a result of a mental disability, or would that be like a result of her being...
So that's the first thing I want to just deal with, which is, could Madeline's mental capacity have an impact on, how can I put this? First of all, please stop snoring, hey. First of all, the length of what was done to her, and hey, come on. And then also it sort of ties in with that, this impression we have that how come her mother didn't know, or how come this went on for such a long time, and was her mother not alert to what was going on with her daughter? And I think there are almost two sides to that coin. The one side is that the perpetrator possibly sees a opportunity in that the victim is to some extent possibly compromised, in the sense that there might be that aspect to it. And then the other side of it is if she has difficulty communicating, she has difficulty kind of getting in touch with her own emotions or expressing herself, maybe it's difficult also for the mother to see what is perhaps disturbing her and worrying her that is additional or different to the original, trying not to use certain words here, the original things that are happening to her, if you're following my meaning. I'm just saying it does make one wonder to what extent is the autism playing a role both in the perpetrator's opportunism and in the mother misinterpreting something. And of course, we're giving Jen Soto the benefit of the doubt here that she's innocent and that she didn't really know what was going on, which I'm not sure I'm comfortable doing, but certainly no charges have been brought against her. The part that I really want to emphasize and I really want to talk about is where the officer says to her, "What do you think happened?" And this interview took place when they still thought she was alive, when they thought, she was going to come back, when, before charges were laid or anything like that. So in the very early stages, what did Jen's mother think had happened to her daughter? Eric, good to see you here. Okay, let's listen in.
I mean, does she, I guess like basic questions I always kind of ask her, can she feed herself without assistance? Does she shower and bathe without assistance? I mean, she has a phone so she can text and talk to people. She has friends at school. Gotcha. And has she ever complained about school?
Not complained exactly. I know it's tough on her. She's given a lot of work. She's always behind on work.
Okay. Got it. And I think the deputies already last night kind of went through her social media a little bit, but if you're okay with it, I'd actually like to take her phone so that I can see if I can get anything else from it. Typically me being able to go through it and go through text and social media will help me sort of establish a pattern of where people go and whatnot. If that's something you'd let me do.
Sure. Will you take her phone away forever or just for right now?
Just for as long as I need it to actually go through it. So,
okay.
So that's also kind of an interesting aspect, is that she was separated from her phone. And as we tend to find in a lot of true crime cases, when someone disappears without their phone, it often means that something horrible has happened. I'm talking about they disappear for a couple of hours, then hours turn into days, and then days turn into weeks and months. Most people, when they are acting within their own agency, when they are doing what they want to do intentionally, they tend to take their cell phones with them, right? And so in a situation where someone doesn't have their cell phone with them, in this case, a little girl going to school, does seem a bit strange, right? Of course, it depends on the habits of certain people. I guess not all kids take their cell phones to school. Although I must say, when I say that, part of me is thinking, are you crazy? Of course, all kids take their cell phones to school. But you sort of want to know specifically with Madeline, did she take her cell phone religiously, obsessively to school, right? We also know that her backpack was, I think, thrown in a dumpster and, that sort of thing. Okay, I'm still waiting for the question, what do you think happened to her?
I'll give it back to you as soon as I'm done.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you.
Back to her, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, that's just about all the questions I have at the moment. You know her better than I do. I guess my last thing would be like, what do you think based off of everything that we've talked about and everything that you've learned so far? Is anything?
So I don't know how well you guys know the Madeline Soto case. I presume some of you have already gone through this on other channels. Do you know how Jen answers this question? So the question is, and it's very early in the whole timeline, what do you think happened to your daughter? Can you remember how she answers the question? Can you remember how Madeline's mother answers the question, what do you think happened to your daughter? Right? Let's see what you guys say. So the question is, what do you think? What do you think happened? And this is an opportunity for the mother to think critically about her daughter and the situation, and then the question is, could she? Did she? And by the same token, if you were in a situation, I'm not saying something like this happened to you, but a situation where you are in an urgent situation, are you able to think critically? Are you able to think in a effective, logical, sensible way? Or are you going to gravitate to the path of least resistance? Are you going to gravitate to thinking in tropes and patterns that have been laid out by the people? Are you going to be able to see into your situation, or are you going to be drawn to think in cliches? That's kind of the question. So is there anyone here that knows the answer to this question? What do you think happened to your daughter? Do you know how Jen answered this question? Maria says she was betrayed by the person who should have protected her. Sally says, I don't remember. Tanny says, I don't know the case. Sally says, what did she say? Okay. Lacey says something bad. Is there anyone who knows the answer here? Anyone who knows the answer? Okay, let me just ask one more question. I know I'm teasing you guys a little. How many of you here have actually gone through this interview, and even though you went through it, you don't know what the answer is to what I'm asking you? And I guess that's another way of saying, whichever creator led you through this, did they not highlight what I'm about to highlight? Maria says she ran away. Bob, good to see you. Stacy says she got kidnapped. That's what I'm looking for. Although she didn't use those words, she used kind of different words. That's the right answer. She thinks someone took her. In her words, I think she was taken. Somebody, right? She was taken, right? Anyway, let's hear it from her mother herself. Let's go.
Sticking out to you?
Based off of everything, me knowing her and knowing how she is, and how tight-knit we are, like, I don't think she would run away.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
so that's her first answer, which is true, is correct. She says, I don't think she would run away. And the officer was wondering, could she have gone to see her biological father, right? And so that's certainly correct, what she's saying there. She's also saying we were quite a tight-knit family.
I feel like she was taken, like, on that short walk from where she was dropped off to the school.
Did you guys catch that?
How tight-knit we are, like, I don't think she would run away.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like she was taken, like, on that short walk from where she was dropped off to the school. It was early in the morning. I'm not sure how many cars were around.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was dropped off somewhere between 8:30 and 8:45 in the morning, which is earlier than we normally take her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So I must say, when I heard that, I was really disappointed, because this is the legacy of the John Benet Ramsey case and the Madeline McCann case, which is a child disappears, and and what is that case of that? There's a Asian girl in California who also disappeared. Can you guys remember that case? And then she was later found. The legacy of these high-profile cases is that when a little, especially a little girl, disappears, the first thing people think is she was kidnapped, she was taken by an abductor, she was snatched by a stranger, kind of thing. Some random person, someone we just don't know, some phantom came out of the blue and just saw someone there and took them, right? And this is what the mother of this child instantly gravitates to, is that makes sense to me. You know, the first thing that makes sense is that some stranger who's got nothing to do with Madeline, in that short little distance between, and we know it never happened, but she's thinking in that short distance between where she was dropped off and the school, that's what happened. Okay, Timmy, I want to. And you might say, wow, I don't understand why you're getting so worked up about this. What's wrong with thinking that? I mean, isn't that a possibility? It is a possibility, but statistically, what happens to young children, the amount of strange abductions is a very, very small percentage. And it's one of the things that's wrong with true crime at the moment. If you're thinking, well, that doesn't sound right to me, it's one of the things that's wrong with true crime is, I would say the majority of people think when a child disappears, it must be a situation, the most likely situation is that a stranger must have taken this child, basically a pedophile, abductor, stranger, right? And what the statistics show us is that the most likely perpetrator when a child is kidnapped and when a child is murdered, especially if the crime occurs in the home, is a family member or someone who is known or familiar to the child. And that's exactly what happened in this case. That is precisely what happened in this case. The most likely suspect all along was someone close to Madeline, and that's exactly what happened. And so it's very unfortunate that parents like Jen Soto don't have that knowledge, that what should be a top of mind awareness. That's really the wrong term, but there isn't that general familiarity with the trend in this. And so the fact that you're going to think, oh yeah, I think a stranger did this, is always going to give the benefit of the doubt to the family perpetrator. Does that make sense? And so the first person you need to look at is someone like a boyfriend, a stepbrother, a step sibling, a cousin, someone who's staying in the house. Remember, was it? I'm just trying to think of another case. There's a man with a beard living in the house as well. Was her name Charlotte? But anyway, the suspicion needs to gravitate to people who have access to that person, regular access to that person, and not to a stranger pedophile abductor. And of course it does happen. There are cases where it happens, but statistically it's really, really unlikely. And so I just find it really unfortunate that when she's asked, what do you think happened here? She thinks the most obvious and logical thing is that. And I want to ask you guys, did you also think that in the beginning? Because that shouldn't be your first obvious logical thought. It should be something else, right? And you might say, you know what, I don't know why you focus on statistics, blah, blah, blah. By the way, the ship Bayesian is based, the name, the Bayesian Superyacht. The guy who owned that ship became a billionaire based on applying statistical probabilities to financial transactions. And so if you believe in statistics and you apply them, you can actually be a far more effective thinker than if you don't. If you just go, I'm just going to go with my gut. And that is one of the really damaging things I'm seeing in true crime is you get popular channels, shock jock channels, and they basically pander to their audience and they tell the audience what they want to hear. So if the audience thinks that it could be a pedophile abductor, they tell the audience that. Because you can have two alternatives. You can have the alternative of, you know, how can I put it? Something happened. Think about the Madeline McCann case and the John Benet Ramsey case. You can have the crime happening within the home, or you can have the shocking monster that's lurking in the streets. And people seem to prefer the latter. So people seem to like the idea of monsters walking around. And it's just not realistic, just really is not realistic. By the way, one of the reasons AI is so successful and so powerful is because it's so intuitively able to track reality and replicate reality based on statistical likelihoods. And that is, in a way, an area where we are very weak. We're not aware of statistics. We don't pay attention to statistics. Part of the power of AI is in statistical algorithms that predict reality in incredibly intuitive and accurate ways. And until we improve our thinking, we are in a way susceptible to being out-thought by AI. And we're going to, if there's time, we might talk a little bit about the statistics, the probability aspects that come into Bayesian theory. I know it's very cerebral, but we might touch on it quite lightly. Someone says, I have no sound on my end. Do you guys have sound? Yeah, statistics. I've always said statistics is an incredibly powerful tool in true crime, but one of the most underutilized and underappreciated. And I think it's one area where I think my channel is very different to many other channels. If you guys watch the Netflix series on Scott Peterson, right at the end, the criminal profiler says the most likely person to kill a pregnant woman is her partner. The statistics show that. Basically, that statistics show one of the most dangerous periods in a pregnant woman's pregnancy is, especially towards the end, I think, of it, is in terms of her own partner. That is true statistically. Liesel, thanks for joining us. Okay, I think we're going to listen to just a little bit more, and then we're going to move on to the next one.
I want to say, I think from what I understood, Orange County got footage of someone by the church in a description of what she was wearing early that morning, just hanging out in the parking lot, and then she got up and left.
Yeah, so the video, they wrote it here, but there was a video of essentially what looks like her at around 8:45, just about that time, walking into that church parking lot that's right near where she got dropped off by Stefan. And it looks like she sits there for about 15 minutes or so and then walks away. So
I'm wondering if it's typical for her to wait at that parking lot too for my stepdad to pick her up from school. So it's not abnormal for her to hang out there.
In that parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay, are you guys ready to move on to the Bayesian Superyacht? I must say I've got so much fascinating information to share with you guys. I just don't know how much we're going to get through. Are you guys ready to move on to this? Let's, Liesel says yes, okay. So let's start with this.
Meanwhile, the captain of that super yacht that sunk off the coast of Italy, killing 7 people last week, the captain is now the subject of a manslaughter investigation. Prosecutors now saying, quote, "It is likely that the crimes of culpable shipwreck and manslaughter were committed, and now it's only a matter of who's going to get charged."
So, well, that's unfortunate. Okay, so can you see the text there? You probably can't. But basically, they say it is likely that the crimes of shipwreck and manslaughter were committed. And I'm still seeing people saying, I don't think there's a crime here. I think it's an act of God. I think it's the weather. I think the problem was that the vessel was flawed. The engineering of the vessel was flawed. And so what we're going to do now is hear from a maritime lawyer and basically dealing with these two opposing scenarios. The one is all of it is a extreme weather event, and the other one is, well, is there human error going on? So let's listen to what they say.
Joining us right now is maritime lawyer Alex Perez. Alex, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what happened was there was like a little a water spout. It's like a little tornado, part of a storm. It came, and now apparently the captain says, I didn't see the storm.
So what's definitely quite crazy about this case is you actually have CCTV from, I think, 2 different shipyards. You've got witnesses. And remember what I said at the beginning of this live stream? I said the holy grail of, like, I don't want to say true crime, let's say of a trial where crime has allegedly been committed, is that you've got video of it, right? And you might say, I don't understand. We've got the holy grail here. You've got a camera that's actually showing the storm and showing the yacht. So isn't it just, there it is. That's what happened. And unfortunately, not all video footage is created equal. And this is a good example of that. You can't see very clearly. Of course, when the lights of the yacht go out, then you can't see anything. You also can't see a water spout in the video, which is very weird. It's like, oh, there's a water spout, there's a tornado that went there. Well, it's like, well, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I see drops of rain, but I don't see a water spout. So yeah, you've got a weird scenario of very noisy reality. It's like, what are we actually dealing with here? We've got video, but we don't know. We've got witnesses, but we can't be sure. We've got statements, but what really happened? And that's also where you've got to think effectively. You've got to think logically and sensibly about this. And in this live stream, I'm going to be sharing some things that I haven't shared in my other analysis before, which is going to just show how there's always room to improve with thinking effectively, thinking scientifically, thinking sensibly. I think it's really ironic that we are dealing with a vessel that's named after a type of theory, a type of statistical attitude to probability. That's actually what the Bayesian's named after, and we're going to deal with that. It's actually mentioned in this book. So I will touch on it in a moment. There's so much to get through. I just hope I can keep it all straight.
But at the same time, the shipbuilder said that yacht should not have sunk. So the question is, what's right?
Well, I think there are right now 2 competing theories, and it looks like the prosecutors are ruling one of those theories out and moving to one where potentially there's more culpability on the captain. The 2 competing theories
So did you hear that he's saying there are two theories, and the prosecutors are moving towards a theory where there's more culpability on the captain?
Are one, something like a water spout or a water tornado, under which that's essentially an act of God, under which really no amount of precaution can prevent that sinking. The other theory, and it looks like that's where the...
So an act of God situation is there's no negligence, there's nothing anyone could have done to prevent this, and you actually hear you hear that sort of narrative coming out repeatedly, that the ship sank in 60 seconds, the ship sank in 2 minutes. That and this is something that was told to the captain of the other craft by the survivors, that, wow, the ship went down in 2 minutes. That kind of scenario is basically, there was nothing we could do. You know, basically, the storm was so horrific. It was like our hands were tied and there was absolutely nothing we could do. But then it's like, well, the other captain was able to do so much. He was able to come to the rescue of the other ship's crew. And, you know, I think one thing that's very underappreciated in terms of this is there wasn't one fatality or two or three or four. When last did we deal with 7 deaths in a true crime case? So many deaths. I mean, we dealt with 5 in the Titan submersible. This is 2 more than that. In some of the most horrific crimes we've dealt with, Chris Watts, there were 3 casualties, arguably 4 people murdered. I'm trying to think of another one, the Laurie Vallow trial. 4, 5, maybe 6 people died in a sort of murderous capacity. Yeah, we've got 7 people dead. That's a lot of loss of life, right? And so we can't be dismissive of it. We need to figure out what is really going on. And think about the Rust incident. 1 person killed, another person seriously injured. If that bullet had gone through Joel Sousa's shoulder, you could easily have had another person injured as well. And it does make you wonder how many how many fatalities in the Rust incident would have turned that pendulum, where people would have said, wow, this is serious. We need to take this seriously. 2 people died, 5 people died. When would you have said, wow, this was a serious thing that happened here? And in a weird way, the safety protocols on a movie set are similar to safety protocols on a yacht. And I'm not saying they're similar in terms of the substance of them. I'm saying the idea that you've got safety protocols is the same. You've basically got well-established industry standards in terms of safety across a whole myriad of things. And just because you don't know what they are, or I don't know what they are, or Joe Blow doesn't know what they are, doesn't mean that they don't exist and that they don't apply. They very much do apply. And so how do they apply in terms of this case? Like, what were the captain's responsibilities?
The Italian prosecutors are going is something like a downpour or a downburst, a localized.
So I just want to add one more thing. In the same way that a captain is more responsible than the rest of his crew for what happens on his ship, in the same way, what would you say in terms of a movie set, who is more responsible than anyone else? Well, the producer, right? The producer of that, the guy who's in charge of the production, has got far more responsibility, in the same way that a captain has the most responsibility. And what was so crazy in the Rust saga was the judge saying, you know what, I think it's a good idea to take away the fact that Alec Baldwin was a producer on this, I think a co-producer. It's almost like saying, you know what, let's take away the fact that Cutfield was the captain and just consider him a crewmate. You know, he's a sailor, just like everybody else, you know, and that's just totally defeats the merits of the case. It totally does that. Can you see how interesting intertextuality gets in that regard as well. Anyway, let's listen.
Heavy amount of rainfall. Sailboats and most vessels encounter heavy storms every day, but that both theories explain a fast sinking, but one, the downburst, puts a little bit more culpability on the captain.
Yeah, indeed. But he said he didn't see the storm coming, although you see some of that video right there. Alex, there is precedent. Back in the day.
So the captain's story is apparently that he didn't see the storm coming. And we've actually heard fairly recently that the other captain said he also woke up. So, I mean, he also didn't see the storm coming. You can't help thinking, do these guys not look at weather forecasts? Because the fishermen, the ordinary, average fishermen in that area, they saw the weather report and they're like, we're not going to go out tomorrow. So it makes you think, what's wrong with these yachtsmen that they are asleep when it actually happens, right? Or kind of what's going on there. And I think another question is that an excuse to say, well, I was asleep when the storm broke, so it's not my fault?
When the Costa Concordia, the big cruise ship, had the problems and dozens of people died, that captain was sentenced to, I think, over a dozen years in prison.
So it's quite interesting. We've just dealt with the Rust incident where the armorer there got sentenced to, was it 18 months in prison, 2 years or something? Well, if you're a ship's captain, you can get sentenced to 8 times that long, right? So it just shows you the onus of responsibility on a ship's captain. Bear in mind, he literally has a lot of people's lives in his hands, in terms of his decision making, in terms of the risks that he takes, in terms of what he does in emergency situations. And I do think it's very interesting when the captain survives an emergency and then many people die. So it's like, how did the captain survive? In this case, almost all the crew members survived except one, whereas you had 6 passengers dying. You also had a little baby surviving because the baby's mother took responsibility for the baby's life, right? Couldn't the captain take responsibility for someone's life? Couldn't the captain delegate, I want each one of you to find a passenger and bring them to safety? Imagine if they'd said that, but it was also easy to say in hindsight, he probably didn't expect the ship to sink. He probably thought, let's just wake the passengers up, not we need to abandon ship ASAP kind of thing.
That's correct. There is precedence for this, and the Costa Concordia was a 2012 cruise ship that sank in Italy. About 32 people died. The captain of that ship was charged and convicted with manslaughter. I think he got 16 years. So this is not unheard of, although it is very unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate. And of course, initially the story made headlines because there was a British tycoon by the name of Mike Lynch on board. And it does appear that, he and some others were, because the boat had capsized, they simply were unable to get out.
It raises some alarming questions.
So that's also not accurate as far as I'm aware. The boat didn't capsize. Capsize literally means went like that, right? Actually, what happened is the yacht, instead of going this way or that way, basically went like this, right? It kind of went like that. This is the front of the yacht. This is the back of the yacht. And the yacht basically went down, stern first, down like that, right? And then it sank kind of vertically. So it's quite astonishing that you've got these guys discussing the legalities of it, and they can't actually, it's the prosecutor who said, based on all the evidence, our position is that the yacht went down stern first, which is the opposite to the Titanic. The Titanic went down bow first. Where Rose and Jack stood on the railings. That's the bow. That's the front of the ship. That's also close to where the water went in. That's also where the iceberg was struck on the starboard side. And so all the water went in that side, and the ship got weighted, and eventually the bow went under, and the rear of the Titanic was literally standing out the water. This is a massive ship, and then it broke into two and then sank to the bottom. The opposite happened with the Bayesian, where the stern, the back of the ship, basically filled with water and then went like that. And everyone seems to think, no, it's a sailboat. It went like this. The wind pushed it, went like this, and it went like that. And you hear it here as well. It's just not accurate. Well, it doesn't seem to be accurate.
Questions, which is, and I understand there's some facts that the vessel sank very fast, but at the same time, from cruise ships to vessels of this size, the captain is responsible for doing what's called a muster drill, explaining in an emergency, when we only have minutes, what should you be doing? And unfortunately, from the facts of this case, it looks like several passengers were stuck in their cabin. When there's water intrusion, they can't get out. So there's other places that are better for.
Yeah, so there were, what he's saying is not strictly accurate. He says several passengers were stuck in their cabins. As far as I know, there was only one passenger stuck in their cabin, and that was Hannah Lynch, Mike Lynch's daughter. I think she was the only passenger who was still in the guest cabins. I don't even know for a fact that she was in her own cabin. And then all the other passengers were actually in the crew quarters on the stern side. So they'd move from their own quarters trying to get away from the water. But then when they got to the crew quarters, they couldn't go any further. Remember the boat's kind of like this. And so if the water is now closing certain exits, the only way is to swim down or horizontally and out. And you might say, well, why didn't they do that? Easier said than done in the dark. You can imagine that could have been a very terrifying way to lose your life. Drowning in the dark, not being able to see, really quite horrible. Casey Boston, good to see you. Beatrix says, this is why I will never go on a cruise. So something else I want to share with you is this really fascinating video. Let's just put this on screen. So this is a video showing it's a schematic showing the movements of not only the Bayesian, but the Bayesian relative to the other yacht that's there. So what makes this case so intriguing is you've got two captains, two crews, two sets of passengers, one super yacht that perishes, that sinks and 7 people die, and then another yacht that's right there that doesn't sink, and the captain from that ship comes along and tries to, and sort of comes to the aid of the 15 survivors. So you've got to go, why did the one ship sink and not the other? What did the one captain do that the other captain didn't do? So let's have a look at this. So there's the Sir Robert Baden-Powell, there's the Bayesian. You can see both of them are being pushed, despite them being anchored by very strong winds in the same direction. But the difference is the one captain assumes control of his vessel, the Sir Robert Baden-Powell, while the other doesn't. You can also see the Bayesian gets pushed a lot further. The Sir Robert Baden-Powell, the captain got the engine started, oriented the ship in the right way against the wind. The Bayesian, not so much. So let's just have a look at that again. Pay attention to which way is this boat oriented. Can you see this one is pointing forward? It's just, I don't know why they do that so quickly. The blue arrow there, or the blue marker, is the Sir Robert Baden-Powell. It seems to be pointing towards the wind, whereas the Bayesian is pointing the other way. It's just kind of being, it almost looks as though it broke loose of its anchor, or the anchor could no longer hold on to anything, and now it's just really being tossed willy-nilly by the wind and the waves. Let's watch that one more time. Pay attention to the blue bar. That's this Robert, and the direction it's facing compared to this one. Can you see? It shouldn't be facing that way. It's also incredible how quickly it moves from there to there. Okay. So I don't know about you guys, but what is definitely quite strange for me is how the captain of the Sir Robert Baden-Powell kind of looks like Geppetto. That's the captain of the Bayesian Superyacht, quite a young guy, is from New Zealand. He is being investigated for manslaughter. And then this is the Superyacht. So that is the bow, and that is the stern. And so what we're saying is that it sank from this side. It didn't turn over like that. It went like this, right? It's not that the mast got blown by the wind. It started sinking like that. And I'm going to show you, there are some vents over here. And the engine compartment is also here. I'll show you guys that in a moment. So that's just some footage from the attempt to find the bodies. And so in terms of bodies, there were 6 bodies found in the compartments of the ship, and then one additional one. I think the chef, he actually managed to get out but still drowned. This is the guy who was on watch. His name's Matthew Griffiths from the UK. He was on watch, 22 years old, when the storm hit, and he said he woke the captain up when the wind was blowing at 20 knots. That's his version of events. And so tragically, father and daughter died in this incident. This is Mike Lynch, a billionaire. A lot of people think of him as the British Bill Gates. Some of the locals thought, wow, is Elon Musk holidaying in the area? The people in the local Sicilian harbor town thought, is this Elon Musk's yacht? So his 19-year-old daughter also died tragically on the yacht. She was also celebrating. She was about to start a university at Oxford, and Mike Lynch was celebrating because he'd just beaten a lawsuit. Hewlett Packard was suing him to the tune of quite a lot of money, and weirdly enough, his partner died, I think, 48 hours earlier in England. He was ridden over. He was out jogging and was ridden over. I think his name's Chamberlain. Anyway, let's have a look at this is the captain of the Sir Baden-Powell. He kind of looks like Geppetto, doesn't he? And so he was kind of a hero of this story. He after saving his ship, he got into a tender, which is a kind of boat, and then he went to a life raft and found 15 people on a life draft with a capacity of 12. 4 people were injured. I think he said 3 of them quite seriously. We know that the captain was also injured. So if you look at this, can you see it says there tender garage? That is actually where it's a kind of a dinghy that they would use to get from the ship to the harbor. I actually incorrectly stated in the last video that the tender garage is here, but there is a little bit of a garage, I think, here for jet skis and that sort of thing. And then there's also a swimming platform here. And the question is, were these hatches open, either of these hatches? I don't know if you can see on this. Can you see there's a vent over here? Can you guys see that? There's a ventilation vent there and over there. So it's also possible that water started going into there, right? And into there. But the point is that this ship sank from this side first, from the stern side first. Okay. What else did I want to show you guys? Okay, so 2 people made really interesting comments that I want to repeat here. Just let me know in the comments whether you feel like you've heard enough and you don't really want me to continue this and we can go on to the next thing. I just think this is pretty interesting. So the first comment is from Zerja, and she says the following: it doesn't matter if she went down by the bow or stern, which I personally disagree with. It does matter. As soon as she began to ship water at 45 degrees, the boat was well on her way to the bottom. She got into trouble when the anchor started dragging. And then she says this: the big issue that no one is talking about is the fact that they were anchored in 50 meters of water. And I think that is an interesting point. And we're going to talk very quickly about the way to anchor a sailboat. So let me just put that over here. Maria says, please continue. Okay. Right. Where am I? Have I disappeared? Can you guys see me on screen? Stephanie says this was a combination of, am I frozen? I don't know what's going on here. Maybe close a couple of, can you guys see me? All dark. Let's just see if I can bring myself back. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, guys. This is weird. Let's try again. This is a first for me, I must say. And I don't know how to solve this. Don't know how to solve this. Yeah, go figure. I'll make a live and Nick is MIA. Guys, I really don't know how to, I don't know if the camera's just not working. Maybe if I close a couple of tabs. Add to stage. Okay, there we go. I used Stephanie's advice. I refreshed and that definitely worked. So thanks a lot for that. Well, Stephanie, you are a lifesaver. Good to see you. Sorry about that. It's really the first time that's ever happened, and at least we figured out how to fix it. Chris Cavey also said, "Can you restart the stream?" Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. Okay. So where was I? Okay. So I'm going to read another comment. Oh, before I do that, let's just quickly talk about the anchor. Can you guys see that? So there is a way to anchor a yacht. Did you guys know that? There's a right way and a wrong way to anchor a yacht. And this again comes down to protocols. Did the captain and crew take the necessary precautions? Did they do their due diligence when they set anchor? So I just want to share a couple of these graphics with you. There's a right way and a wrong way to put up a ship's anchor. And these are just a couple of examples. So you want the anchor to be, you want the bow of the ship to be facing the wind and the anchor to be upwind, I guess. But what happens if the wind changes direction? What are the protocols then? So a big problem with the Bayesian was the fact that it pulled loose of its anchor, and then also its engine compartment flooded, and so it was unable to get itself out of that situation. But that's the bottom line here, is you want the bow to be facing into the wind, cutting through the wind. You don't want your boat, if the wind is coming in this direction, you don't want your boat to be doing this, right? And you also don't want the boat to be basically going in circles. You want it to be cutting through the wind. In other words, the wind is also going to be blowing waves and water. And so you want the boat oriented towards the wind. Now, if the wind direction changes, then you need to start the engines. Your sails are going to be down. You need to start the engines and now orient the boat again in against the wind, right? And okay, so let me just show you a couple more of these. Okay. By the way, I think this is the stretch of road where his financial manager died while he was jogging. So what's fueled a lot of conspiracy theories is that 2 days before, something like 48 hours or hours before Mike Lynch, who's a billionaire, before he died, his financial manager was ridden over in England, and I think it's this stretch, somewhere along this stretch of road. Okay, so let me quickly read the other comment. Well, first, let me just complete the original comment. So she says, the big issue that no one is talking about is the fact that they were anchored in 50 meters of water. The scope needs to be at a bare minimum 3 times the depth, if not 5 or 7 in bad conditions. Now, the scope, as I understand it, is the length from the ship to the anchor. I'm not sure if it's the angle downwards, but it's basically got to do with anchoring the boat safely. And so if conditions are worse, then there needs to be more scope in terms of the anchor. And so the question is, how much chain did the Bayesian have for the anchor? And this particular commenter says the design is fundamentally flawed. The Bayesian was a very funny looking power boat with an extreme rig. It's bad at both. My education is in physics and yacht design, and after looking at the stability curves, my opinion is that the vessel is fundamentally flawed. So this person's opinion is basically, it's all about the design. The design of this craft is why it sank, kind of thing. And I guess that's one additional defense. You could say it's all because of the weather. The human error side is the design of the craft. And I mean, you've heard the manufacturer saying it's unsinkable. And then the other side is that it's all human error, kind of thing. And I think it's kind of a combination maybe of all of these, but proportionally some more than others. Okay. What's next? So then there's another comment. Let's just see. So I just want to share this with you guys before I forget. Can you guys see that? So this is a schematic. That's the overall view of the deck, right? The mast is over there. The sun beds for sun tanning is sort of over there. Kind of a lounge is over there. If you go down one layer, then there you can see the tender. That's where the tender is located, right over there. On the bow side, very close to the bow side. And then if you go down another layer, then that's the guest quarters, which is on the bow side, this side, and the crew quarters more on the stern side. Now we know that the bow side started filling up with water and would have entered these guest bedrooms first. As far as I know, Hannah died in this sort of area. The engine room is over here. The jet ski launching area, I think, is over here. The swimming platform is over here. And the question is, were these hatches open, this hatch and this hatch? If true, the water could have spilled in from this side, gone into the engine compartment, which made it impossible to orient the boat once the anchor mooring broke or came loose. We're still not 100% sure what happened there. I don't think we've got time to do Bayesian inference, but let's just have a quick look at what it is. Can you guys see that? It's a method of statistical inference in which Bayes' theorem is used to update the probability for hypothesis as more evidence or information becomes available. So it's really complicated, but there are a couple of really interesting scenarios. Let's see if I can quickly go through one. I just want to give you guys a quick practical example. I find it really fascinating. And, could one apply this to true crime? So here it is. Suppose there are 2 bowls full of cookies. Bowl number 1 is 10 chocolate chip and 30 plain cookies, while bowl number 2 is 20 of each. Now don't worry about the details. We just want to get an idea of what this is all about. Our friend Fred picks a bowl at random and then picks a cookie at random. We may assume there's no reason to believe Fred treats one bowl differently from the other. Likewise for the cookies. The cookie turns out to be a plain one. How probable is it that Fred picked it out of bowl 1? And then there's this complicated equation. In other words, it's trying to predict human behavior, right? And this has got incredible application to things like algorithms, right? Again, that predict human behavior. Here's another one. An archaeologist is working at a site thought to be from a medieval period between the 11th century to the 16th century. Again, you don't really have to pay attention to the details, it's just the concept. However, it is uncertain exactly when in this period the site was inhabited. Fragments of pottery are found, some of which are glazed and some of which are decorated. It is expected that if the site were inhabited during the early medieval period, then 1% of the pottery would be glazed and 50% of its area decorated. Whereas if it had been inhabited in the late medieval period, then 81% would be glazed and 5% of its area decorated. Now, you don't need to be a genius to figure this out. It's basically, you're dealing with 2 alternative possibilities, right? Either it's this or it's that. Which is more probable, right? And you have a lot of the same thing in true crime. Either this happened or that happened. Either it's the intruder theory or a family member did it. Either it's murder or it's that. Either it's an accident or foul play. And you're using sophisticated statistical analysis to really figure out what is very likely the reality, right? So I definitely find this really interesting. There's more information in here. I don't know if you guys want me to deal with it. Are you guys finding this interesting, or is it kind of going over your heads? Maria says this is fascinating. Do you guys want me to read just a quick reference to Bayesian theory from the Scout mindset? Let's get a vote. Like, do you want me to move on, or do you want to hear about that? What do you guys say? Brilliant, interesting, yes. Okay, so I'm referring to this book, The Scout Mindset. The blurb is Why Some People See Things Clearly and Others Don't. I really recommend this book. So we're turning to page, if you've got your own copies, I know I did recommend it to a lot of my members and subscribers. We're going to page 191 of a chapter titled How Beliefs Become Identities. And it's a subsection titled The Probability Wars, right? It's from this book, The Scout Mindset by Julia Galef. Listen to this. No question is so dry or esoteric that it's immune to the forces of identity. Don't believe me? Allow me to introduce you to the long-running debate between the Frequentists and the Bayesians, 2 camps of statisticians who analyze data differently. So while I'm reading this, I want you to think about it. Are you a Frequentist or a Bayesian, right? Just in terms of those 2 alternatives, if you had to make a choice, if you had to pin your colors to the mast, so to speak, would you say you're a Frequentist or a Bayesian? Let me define them. Frequentists define the probability of an event objectively in terms of how frequently it would occur in a long series of trials. A frequentist would say that the probability of a coin flip coming up heads is 1/2, because if you could flip the coin an infinite number of times, half of the outcomes would be heads. So does that sound like you? Would you say, yeah, that makes sense to me. I think I'm a frequentist, right? Yvonne, good to see you here. Bayesian is based around a theorem called Bayes' rule. named after the Reverend Thomas Bayes, the 18th century philosopher and statistician who first came up with it. Bayesians define, this is important, Bayesians define the probability of an event subjectively, right? And this is why Bayesian theory is so useful in terms of predicting human decisions, human thinking, human responses. And this is in many fields: finance, jurisprudence, that's law, marketing, consumer behavior. I'm trying to think of other examples. I think the other examples are mentioned here. Can't remember where I saw it. So you can see how it's used in the courtroom. Have a look here. Bayesian analysis in the courtroom. Bayesian inference can be used by jurors to coherently accumulate the evidence for and against a defendant and to see whether in totality it meets their threshold for beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I have said in the past, without, I think, consciously being aware of this, I've said, couldn't AI be used in court almost like a kind of referee that you see in sport, where it's just given as a guide to say, this is, you know, in sports like tennis, the I think it's called Hawkeye, will basically tell you if the ball is in or out, but ultimately it's up to the match referee to decide what to do with that information. You could have the same thing with a juror, where you have AI examining information and then giving that information to the juror, and you've got 12 jurors, and then them going, well, I'm going to ignore that and go with what I think, or I'm going to consider that and go with what I think. And so it says here, Bayes' theorem is applied successfully to all evidence presented, with the posterior from one stage becoming the prior for the next. The benefit of the Bayesian approach is that it gives the juror an unbiased rational mechanism for combining evidence. It may be appropriate to explain Bayes' theorem to jurors in odds form, as betting odds are more widely understood than probabilities. So it really is quite interesting. It says here, the use of Bayes' theorem by jurors is controversial. In the United Kingdom, a defense expert witness explained Bayes' theorem to the jury in R versus Adams. The jury convicted, but the case went to appeal on the basis that no means of accumulating evidence had been provided for jurors who did not wish to use Bayes' theorem. So it's already something that is having some kind of impact on the law, right? And so who knows? I mean, you might also say, I don't know why you're covering the Bayesian yacht. It's not true crime. Well, it kind of is coming in by the back door. I mean, it's a classic thing. Is it an accident or foul play, or is it somewhere in between, right? Okay, let me continue reading. This is again from the Scout Mindset. She describes the various applications. Bayesians define the probability of an event subjectively in terms of how confident someone is that an event will occur. Remember the exercises we did in chapter 6, in which we learned to quantify our confidence in a claim by thinking about what bets we would be willing to take on it. A Bayesian would call these probabilities, a Frequentist would not. You might expect these debates to play out exclusively in technical language buried in academic journal articles. But for decades, there was an annual Bayesian conference where attendees, okay, I don't want to go through that. Like all good observational humor, it's based on a seed of truth. If you browse the statistics blogosphere, you'll find Bayesians and Frequentists accusing each other of irrational prejudice, complaining about fundamentalist Frequentist, orthodox Frequentist, anti-Bayesian prejudice, smug Bayesians, angry anti-Bayesians, Bayesian cheerleaders, and diehard Bayesians. One statistician even renounced Bayesianism and wrote a blog post titled "Breathing Some Fresh Air Outside of the Bayesian Church." Okay, I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but this definitely is pretty interesting. Okay, that's that. Okay, now there's another comment I want to read. Let's just pull this back up. Is there anyone here that hasn't watched a single Bayesian super yacht video and is now interested and intrigued? Let's see a show of hands. Anyone? Is there anyone here that hasn't watched a single Bayesian super yacht video and is now like, wow, this is actually quite interesting? Anyone? Maria, okay, and Ms. Rex Murphy, okay, cool. I'd love to go into the whole Bayesian inference stuff later. There's more to say about it. But I want to just move on to this comment. Where is it? What have I done with it? So scared to fiddle too much, I might just get the same problem I had earlier. Is it this? Yes. Okay. Are you guys ready? And this is from someone called DiverXJ900S. Okay. And this person says, I worked as crew for 19 years in the super yacht industry, 19 years in the super yacht industry, and spent a little time on this brand of boat. So this is really useful. Someone with direct experience, right? And says, I was on this brand of boat, but not the specific whole series. Here's my tuppence worth. A downburst or water spout. So number one, a downburst or water spout caused the boat to heel over beyond its angle of vanishing stability, right? Let me put that in chat just so we can keep tabs of each thing. Okay, that's number one. Number two, once on its side, it could not return upright. If you guys have been watching my videos, you know I personally disagree with that. You might say, you're not a yachtsman, but it doesn't appear like it did turn on its side. The next one, water ingress began through the ventilation apertures in the hull on the starboard quarter. The down flooding angle for these is 44 degrees. So this was already gulping tons of water into the stern area well before its vanishing stability angle. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to fit this whole comment in, but you can see this is someone who has quite a lot of technical knowledge. I just want to be clear, the prosecutors don't believe that this is how the ship sank. They say specifically it didn't do that. It didn't capsize. It went like this. So yeah, you've got people who sailed this ship saying, this is what I think happened. It's not what the prosecutors think happened. Anyway, that's number three. Number four, on its way over the recessed aft cockpit area, I think meaning on the way of the water, there would have been filling from the starboard side deck stair entry and then pouring into the main saloon through the open patio doors, which are documented to fail and fall open beyond about 20 degrees of heel. These motorized sliding doors are a nightmare on almost every yacht. Ask any yacht engineer. That's number four. So this is just a description predicting the flow of water from the sort of stern side of it. I can't show the entire comment, but that's some of it. Let's go on to number five. As it went further, as the water went further into the lower compartments, water would have started pouring in through the open starboard bridge door as the crew were initially trying to grab cushions, etc., from outside and stow them inside. So I must say, one of the things that to me is quite bizarre is Matthew Griffiths. He said the first thing he did when basically the first response he did to everything was to pack away plants and cushions. And you kind of think that should be the last thing he should have been doing. He should have been waking up passengers. But it's easy to say in retrospect that this was an emergency and they didn't have a lot of time, right? Okay, so that's the next one. Now, number 6, likely the lazarette to engine room watertight door was open at anchor, so the engineer could get easy access from his cabin in the lazarette. That's the storage area. Okay. Christina, good to see you. Number 7, now you have a vessel down on starboard side, stern heavy from the earliest flooding, and the lazarette, engine room, and central guest cabin area are all flooding. Now, in terms of, and I get this as a really experienced person, I don't believe it was listing on the starboard side. I believe it was simply listing on the stern side. That's number 7. And now number 8. That's 3 out of 5 potential watertight areas compromised. So in a way, a similar situation to Titanic. You've got one compartment filling up, fills up the next one, fills up the next one, and then the whole ship is compromised. From there, the vessel had no chance. Number 8. The 10 or so sister hulls to Bayesian are likely similarly vulnerable, but due to different mast configuration, they may have a stability characteristic, better stability characteristics. Wow, I'm running out of voice here. So can you see how my initial decision to use the Titanic as allegory wasn't as far-fetched as a lot of people thought? Number 9, irrespective of the possibly open starboard bridge door, this vessel would have sunk anyway, no matter what the crew did, if it was indeed laid on its side by the wind. I don't really think that that's what happened here. I don't think it was laid on its side by the wind. The bridge door may have simply have speeded the process a little. I'm not going to put that one up. Number 10, as soon as the big wind hit, the vessel would have likely dragged its anchor. Well, that is a good point. As soon as the wind hit, the vessel would have likely dragged its anchor and will naturally slew and present side onto the wind, making it vulnerable. I believe that that is definitely true. I think the problem was all of this happened so suddenly that when it was being dragged by the anchor, like a witness actually said, she saw the whole yacht trembling. It was like going like this. And you get the idea that the anchor is sort of holding it and the wind is pushing it, and it's basically taking the full brunt of the wind, but the anchor is also kind of trying to hold it. And then eventually the anchor breaks loose and the whole yacht whips around, literally throwing the people off the yacht into the water, the people who were on the deck. Okay, so now this yacht is really moving in a very chaotic way. It's not being steered, it's not being navigated, it's literally at the mercy of the storm. And so basically, if you're on this boat, you're basically thinking, I need to jump off this boat, or I need to not be on this boat if I want to survive. The boat's sinking and the boat's doing this. Think of Titanic. Titanic just slowly sank into the water, and then that was it. This boat is doing all sorts of different things. Probably if you were in that yacht and below decks, you're going to be banging your head against the wall and the ceiling as this yacht's doing this. Okay, next one. I imagine the captain and engineer were desperately getting engines started in order to maneuver the vessel head to wind to make it less vulnerable. However, a vessel like this would be quite a handful to try to recover from beam on, especially with the anchor and cable still down. I've been in 2 such incidents. So when I'm reading their comments, not me. I've been in 2 such incidents in my 19 years, once on a sailboat and once on a motor yacht. We managed to get head to wind on both occasions and thus did not suffer knockdowns. However, we did struggle to regain control of the beam on dragging vessel, and on both occasions were less than 100 meters from losing the boat onto the rocks. Wow, close call. When this stuff comes in, it's no joke. I could not walk upright on the deck to go forward to operate the anchor equipment. I had to crawl on all fours or the wind would have simply ripped me off the deck into the sea. Both occasions happened at night in darkness. Both occasions were unforecasted, and both occasions went from 10 knots of wind to 70 knots plus in less than 3 minutes, with deluging rain reducing visibility to about 15 meters. Once near Green Island in Antigua and once in the south of France at the islands off Cannes. Wow, seems like being on a yacht isn't all it's cracked out to be. Okay, so that's that. Are you guys ready to move on to the next thing? So let's have a look here. Madeline Soto, 49%. Bayesian Superyacht, not too many votes. Are you guys ready to move on to the next thing? I just want to show you, before we do move on, 2 of these graphics that I've got here. This is the Titanic. Let's get rid of that. And this just gives you an idea. These are the compartments. So this side of the Titanic, can you see over here? It's on my side of the screen. This side of the Titanic, meaning the front side, it was actually the starboard side, which is, as we're looking at it, the other side, is the side that struck the iceberg, but these are the compartments that all flooded. And I'm just trying to see where the engines are. The engines are over here. If the Titanic had just kept going, I think maybe dozens more people, in other words, if they kept sailing in the direction of the Carpathia, I just wonder whether that could not have saved a lot more lives. I don't know whether the ship remaining static would have led to less water flowing, and I think that's also possibly a factor. Definitely an arguable point. Anyway, what do I want to show you here? It's this one. For those who are totally new to the Bayesian Superyacht, this is a nice picture of it. And you can kind of see here, there are some vents over there. These vents can also fill up with water. This is one of those hatches that can be opened and made into like a swimming platform. And then there's another one here that can be made into a jet ski launcher. So there's another one over here. And the question is, were those hatches open? So what the prosecutor believes is the ship sank, the water flooded the rear end, the the stern end, and the ship basically ended up vertically in the water like that. And a lot of people think the conventional thing when it comes to sailboats that it capsized, but that's not what the prosecutors think, which I think is quite interesting. Thanks, E.G. Moore. Appreciate that. Okay. Right. What's the next one? What is the next thing we're covering here? Jay Slater, that's right. Let me just get the right slide on. So I'm not going to be covering Jay Slater directly. I'm going to be covering something similar to that, basically intertextual to that. Okay, so you'll get what I'm driving at in a second. So the question is, if Jay had done one thing differently, he wouldn't have died, right? I know it's a little bit of a tricky question because you could say this or that or that or that, but think about it in a very basic way. I don't really want to say if he did one thing differently. I want to say if he had one thing at his disposal. I think that kind of makes it very easy. If Jay had something at his disposal, he would still be alive today. What do you think that is? So Jay Slater went missing in the wilderness and he died, right? If there was one thing that he had at his disposal, just that, he'd still be alive today. Someone says water. So I didn't mean to spell his name with a small letter. So let's just have a look. Someone says a brain. Someone says good friends. And then a couple of others: charged, cell phone charge, transportation, working phone, water. Okay, Christina, a map. So as I said, it is a little bit of an unfair question, but just think about that question as we deal with this case. It's really interesting. It's really gives you an idea how easily you can get into trouble and how easily you can get out of trouble in a situation like this. How do I do this? Okay, so we're going to look at this article on CNN. Let me get rid of that. Liesel says, perhaps if the Bayesian guests would have chosen the rowboat behind door number 2, they would still be alive. That's a great point, except yeah, I really don't know how long it takes to launch a tender. I don't know how long you need, and I would assume you need power. I would assume that the hatch opens hydraulically or something like that. But yeah, in theory, that does make sense. As far as I know, the life raft deployed automatically, so they didn't even do that. That was just done automatically. Someone did say something that was really interesting, which is the that couldn't some of the guests have been taking sleeping pills? I don't know if it was you said that, but that's certainly possible. You know, if any of the guests had taken sleeping pills, that would have made them 10 times harder to rouse, right? And don't super rich people do things like that, take sleeping pills? Another thing that is new to us who don't know super yachts, apparently the keel was a weighted keel. I think it weighed something like 60,000 tons. Can't be 60,000, 60 tons, 90,000 pounds, I think. And so about 60 tons, and the keel was retracted. So all of that weight is not balancing the yacht. It's actually high up inside the keel. And so that's another reason why the whole boat would be top heavy and would lead to additional sinking. Anyway, thanks for that comment. Okay, so let's deal with this story. So we're trying to think about Jay Slater via this narrative. And so 15 co-workers. So someone said he didn't have friends with him. That's the problem. Jay died because there was no one with him. Well, this person had 14 people with him. and we'll see what happens. 15 co-workers hiked up a Colorado mountain. There were only 14 when they came back down. So let's just deal with this story. So it was an office retreat. I think it's kind of like a work function. They headed up a mountain trail in Colorado. It was, I think, quite near Slater, where Suzanne Morphew went missing. They went all the way up. When they came back down, one of their colleagues was missing. So listen to this. This is the narrative. They set out from the Blanks Cabin trailhead on Mount Shavano near Slater, right? The morning of August 23rd. So this was just a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago. Chaffee County Search and Rescue South said in a news release on Facebook. I wonder if we can go to that. So that's really the search that went on. You can see this has also got a bit of a weather aspect to it, right? After one of the hikers reached the mountain's peak around 11:30 a.m. local time and turned to head back down, he became disoriented, right? In the Jay Slater case, he also became disoriented. In the Bayesian Superyacht, people were also disoriented by the dark, by the fact that they're on an unstable surface, by the fact that the yacht's turning around, by the fact that there's a storm, by the fact that the yacht is sinking, all those things. In his initial attempts to descend, he found himself in the steep boulder and scree field on the northeast slopes towards Shavano Lake. And so this is quite important. The concerned hiker sent a pin drop to his colleagues who were already descending. So at some point they separated from one another, right? And so he told them where he was, and then they said to him, "You're on the wrong route, pal." They told him to climb back up the slope to regain the trail, but by around 4 p.m. when the hike had regained the ridge, he sent the group another pin drop, letting them know he was near the trail. Shortly after that message, a strong storm passed through the area with freezing rains and high winds. So you've kind of got a similar thing happening here. Instead of a boat or in Tenerife, you've got a hiker who's separated from his friends. He tells them where he is, and then a storm moves in, right? And freezing rain, high winds, again, he became disoriented. He loses cell phone signal, right? And then what? His friend said, "Hey, our friend's in trouble. Can you find him?" And this is where he was last reported. So the rescue officials said they received an alert around 9 p.m. That's quite late, about an overdue hiker dressed in all black, somewhere on Mount Shavano's standard route. Well, him being dressed in black at night, not the best situation. Rescue teams worked through the night into the morning of August 24 to search for the hiker. Strong winds and freezing rain hindered their efforts. Again, what do you think was the one thing that Jay Slater needed to do that could have changed everything? Working from the last known point on the ridge between Shavano and Tabagoshe, I don't know how to say that, the teams are focused on clearing the standard route, right? I think it's similar to using the pin that Jay Slater, that identified Jay Slater's position. They're doing the same thing with this guy, right? And then it says here, several other rescue organizations joined the effort to find the man, who told rescuers when he was found, and this is so important, he had fallen at least 20 times on the steep slopes after becoming very disoriented. And the same is possible with Jay, that Jay is disoriented as well. This guy fell 20 different times. He's also on steep terrain. He's also on unfamiliar terrain. After the last fall, he was unable to get back up, but very luckily regained enough cell service to make his call to 911. And there you have it. This is the bottom line. The 911 call that made all the difference, helping search and rescue crews pinpoint his location. So if Jay Slater was just had his phone with him, he could have just phoned a friend, phoned his mother, phoned, I don't know what the Tenerife, the equivalent of 911 was in Tenerife, but he could have done that. But just if he had a cell phone signal, he'd still be alive today. Just that. And this anecdote, this story proves that, because they say rescuers found him in a gully below Esprit Point. Where did they find Jay Slater? Also in a ravine. He was taken to a hospital for additional care. And what did they say? This hiker was phenomenally lucky to have regained self-service when he did, and to still have enough consciousness and wherewithal to call 911. Though he was located in a tertiary search area, it would have been some time before teams made it to that location on their own. So can you see how him regaining self-service saved his life? Can you see how explicitly true it is in the story? That's basically it. I mean, he had a charged phone, but he also had the use of his phone. Okay, we're going to end off by looking at Scott Peterson. Have we missed anything? We still got Paul Gauguin. I'm going to do Scott Peterson. When we've done that, we'll see what my voice is like and what if you guys feel like dealing with Gauguin. Okay, so have any of you guys read this book, Blood Brother by Anne Bird? Any of you read it? And the subtext or the subtitle to it is 33 Reasons My Brother Scott Peterson is Guilty. And there are some photos in this book of the author with Scott Peterson and with her biological mother, Jackie Peterson. And there's even a photo you might not have seen before of Lacey. There's Lacey and Scott. I think that's Anne Bird over there. So I see there's someone here who says, I've read it years ago. Christina, can you remember what Anne Bird said about how she thought Lacey was murdered, how she thought her half-brother murdered Lacey? Can you remember what her theory was? Hetty B says, I think the lack... okay. Is there anyone here that's read this book that knows what Anne Bird's theory was for how Scott actually committed the crime? Anyone know? Anyone? Thanks. I will do that. I actually ran intervals this afternoon, and went pretty hard. Definitely pushed it pretty hard. There we go. Well, we've got some well-read people here. So yeah, that's absolutely correct. Anne Bird's hypothesis was that Scott drowned Lacey in the pool. She said that remember, Scott actually stayed with her. They had a home overlooking San Francisco Bay, and she said quite a few times Scott would say, I need to go and clean the pool. And she thought, why? Who really cares about the pool? Why is Scott so focused on the pool? And so it was her theory that that he drowned Lacey in the pool. Part of the other reason why she felt it was likely was I think she'd said she'd personally seen Lacey in the pool, and Lacey had often complained, saying that the pregnancy was giving her backache, and so she would lie in the pool on a lilo just to give her back some relief, right? Yeah. So that is what her theory is. So I'm going to be doing a video where I'm going to be dealing with the probability that this is true, and I think there's some supporting evidence. So, for example, the fact that Lacey was found, I don't want to say drowned in San Francisco Bay, but found submerged. If she was drowned somewhere else and then submerged in San Francisco Bay, let's say she was found very soon after she was killed, then you might say, well, she just fell into the bay and drowned, right? So I'm just saying from that perspective, in a way, that scenario might make some sense, right? But I think there's another aspect that makes it quite improbable. Can you think what that could be? What obvious thing makes the whole thing somewhat improbable? I don't think so. I don't think it would stay there. No, I don't think so. Okay. How many of you want me to cover Paul Gauguin? Anyone? Anyone? Let's have a look at the votes. I see Paul Gauguin wasn't an option. I'm sure if I put Paul Gauguin there, it would have gotten maybe 1% of the votes. Anyone want me to talk about Paul Gauguin? Anyone here not know who Paul Gauguin is? Maria says, please. Hamilton Art. Well, Hamilton Art, I think I've often seen you in Van Gogh letters. Chris Cavey says, don't leave us on that cliffhanger. I'm afraid I'm going to have to. Lisa says, that makes sense, and that's why he had those umbrellas all alongside his pool. That's also quite a good point. Okay, so we're going to deal with Paul Gauguin. So let me say at the outset that there are two theories of Paul Gauguin, and weirdly enough, that there's a mirror to that with Vincent van Gogh. What I mean is, there are people who believe Paul Gauguin was a jerk. In Afrikaans, you'd say a schelm, a crafty, no gooder, a jerk, an arsehole, but even more than that, someone who's pretty much a dude of ill repute, a liar, just not a good guy. I think that's the best way of putting it. There's some people who think that he's not a good guy. And then the other people who think that's totally inappropriate, it's totally unwarranted. He was a great guy. And a lot of the rumors about him aren't true. And, people say that he had a child bride that's been over emphasized, and she was 15, she wasn't 13, and this and that and the next thing. But the point is that there are two narratives, that he was a bad boy and worse than that, and the other one is that he was a good guy, and which is true. And funny enough, there's a similar narrative to Vincent van Gogh, which is the one narrative that he had mental illness and that he did things to himself, cut off his ear and did other things. And then there's another narrative that actually was more of a martyr figure. He was he saw himself as a kind of a pilgrim. He was kind of a self-sacrificing kind of person. You might say, who's no one is like that. Like, who today is like that? Well, the answer is Gabby Petito. When Gabby Petito was stopped by the police, and police said, "We saw someone hurt you. We saw someone hit you." She said, "No one hit me. If anything, I hit him." That's a kind of scenario that we might apply to Vincent van Gogh, where he didn't want to blame Paul Gauguin for what he did to him, or somebody else for what was done to him, right? In fact, after Van Gogh was shot, he was asked, what happened? He said, "I don't want to talk about it." He basically said, "My body is mine and I don't really want to talk about it." And it took him like 30 hours to die from that gunshot wound. But let's talk about Paul Gauguin, and we're going to refer to two articles that are totally counter to one another. There's one narrative and then there's another narrative. Let me ask you a question. If you're an art consultant, an art dealer, an art expert, an art enthusiast, an artist, are you going to think badly of an artist? Let me just ask that in simple terms. If you're someone who sells art for a living, if you're a curator, if you're a auction house, if you have a museum or a gallery, are you going to think of, if you got the option of thinking the glass is half full or half empty? I've got a half full, half empty glass here, and it's to do with an artist. Are you going to think of the artist as glass full or glass empty? Glass half full or glass half empty? If your business is in selling the artist, are you going to be tending to think badly of the artist or positively of the artist, pessimistically of the artist, optimistically, positively, negatively? What are you going to think about it? Heather says, "I never liked him, always heard bad things about him." So all I'm trying to say is the people who write about artists tend to be in the art community. And so, like yachtsmen, they kind of bias towards what they know. But they're not going to be looking at it objectively and saying, "You know what, let's objectively think about the facts and the evidence regarding this person." They're going to be thinking about it subjectively in terms of their relationship towards the artist vis-a-vis their own invested interest in terms of the art market. Does that make sense? Even if you're an art journalist, you're going to be wanting to tell the better story of a particular artist. So let's see if I can come up with those two articles. I hope I can find them. I think it's this one. So that's the one. Yes, good. So these are the two that I'm looking for. Hopefully it's going to let me log in. Is it? I think so. Okay. So these are two really excellent articles. I'm not gonna go through them exhaustively, but the idea is really just to show you how you can have two competing realities, and that's where something like Bayesian theories may be quite important, where you say, how much of this is based on evidence, and where is this going to take us? Are you eventually going to be more anchored in facts and evidence or not? Now, what are the statistical probabilities here? And so if we're doing a Bayesian statistical analysis on the two possibilities, the one is Paul Gauguin a good guy or is he a bad guy, right? Well, what would we be feeding into that equation? Well, a couple of things. And so this is the good boy narrative. So basically the whole article is dealing with, did he have syphilis or not, right? And let's face it, we know for a fact, well, I don't want to put it that way. I don't want to say we know for a fact that Vincent van Gogh had syphilis. We do know for a fact that his brother had syphilis. Very likely Van Gogh had syphilis. And I would say as a result of Van Gogh and Gauguin cohabiting for about 2 months, it's very likely that Paul Gauguin had syphilis as well. How do you get syphilis? Well, you go to brothels a lot. You have sex with a lot of different people in the late 19th century, right? It is also known as the French disease. Paul Gauguin was French, and he was an artist doing what artists did, have mistresses and get drunk and go to brothels constantly. I mean, he was basically a married dude who was living like a bachelor. That should also tell you something. So have a look at some of your comments. What happened to Van Gogh's ear? He was a fascinating artist. That's true. Okay, so let's deal with this article. So it says, sex and syphilis, Paul Gauguin's teeth prove we may have got the bad boy artist wrong, which is another way of saying, hey, in my opinion, I think Paul Gauguin wasn't that bad. I think he was quite a good guy. Then it says, the French artist's legacy has been tarnished by his scandalous behavior in Tahiti, but intriguing evidence suggests it's time to think again, says his biographer. So someone's written a book about him and basically saying, I don't think he was such a bad guy, right? Paul Gauguin was born in 1848. He's a giant of post-impressionism whose life is always understood as being as adventurous as the art he created. But is it time for a reappraisal? And this is really interesting, and this is what I think a lot of my friends from the Van Gogh letters will appreciate. Listen to this. The key to understanding Gauguin, in other words, to understanding his identity, is knowing that he spent his first 7 years in Peru. Did you guys know that? Did you know that he spent 7 years of his childhood in Peru? His grandmother claimed to be descended from Inca kings. Gauguin's consciousness was formed in the Inca caverns of the family palace, lit by silver candlesticks as high and as heavy as a man. Outdoors, he ran wild through a magical realist Eden, prowled by jaguars and curlicued by snakes. Snow-topped volcanoes spewed fire. Earthquakes made the earth dance, and the ships in the port of Iquique jump in the air. All his life, he sought out the freedom of wild places to match his Peru of the mind. I must say, this is such a well-written, well-executed article. It's a really long article, but very much worth a read. I'll put a link to it in the description. I'm not going to go through the whole article, but I'll just go into some of it. Then his mother took him to France age 7 to be educated in a Roman Catholic seminary. That's also important. He's brought up as a Roman Catholic. That's also going to play into his identity. It was dedicated to training priests. Grey skies, clothes, rules. He couldn't speak French. He was small for his age, stocky and swarthy. This is also quite important. He was bullied and teased. And so that raised a question. When he lived with Van Gogh, did he not bully and tease Van Gogh? And certainly his self-portrait of Van Gogh looks like he's teasing Van Gogh. And we know that they had arguments. And so this is how he described himself. I am a wild thing from Peru, he yelled, hurling himself into fights. And so this is already telling you something. This guy is a fighter. This is somebody who argues and fights with other people. And so the question is, we know for a fact that Van Gogh's ear, the ear incident was immediately preceded with a big argument with this guy. And so how big was that argument? Was it a small little argument? And then Van Gogh said, I'm so miserable, I'm going to cut off my ear. Or was this wild guy, he says, I'm a wild thing from Peru, did this wild guy, did he have enough of this eccentric artist? Perhaps Van Gogh got drunk and drank a lot of absinthe and himself was behaving like a wild man. And so it was two wild men totally under the influence that went at each other. And so it says it pushed him into the role of misfit rebel for life. And this is a picture of him. This is a picture of Gauguin. Can you guys see that? Okay, let's continue. So my research discovered the profound effect the seminary had on his inner life. Every morning, Gauguin recited the school catechism, beginning, where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? And what's interesting is there's also that in his life, in his backstory. So, if you're saying that Gauguin was this good guy, sensible, had good mental health, but Van Gogh didn't, this suggests otherwise. His mother enrolled the rebellious teenager into the merchant navy. Remember, Van Gogh also wanted to join the army. He knocked about the world, lost his virginity to an opera singer in Brazil. When the Franco-Prussian War broke out, his ship was used to transport prisoners of war. How could a self-declared wild thing partake in human imprisonment? He jumped ship in Toulon and made his way up war-torn France to Paris, where his mother was dead and her house destroyed. Her lover fixed Gauguin up with a job in the Paris Stock Exchange. He was astonishingly successful at making money and became famous. This is really an incredible anecdote here. Let me just blow it up a bit. This is such a colorful anecdote. He became famous for taking taxis to work and keeping them ticking until he was ready to go home. But the outsider remained the outsider. He didn't live on one of Haussmann's grand new boulevards, but in an artisan quarter. He spent all his wealth on Impressionist paintings. And then this is quite important in terms of his backstory. In 1873, aged 25 and married to a Danish woman, he started to paint in his spare time, copying the Impressionist canvases he bought. After 6 years, it exhibited in the Salon and the fourth Impressionist exhibition. So he's quite talented in that sense. And then this happened. The stock market crash of 1882-83 wiped Gauguin out. His wife went back to Denmark, taking their 5 children, plus Gauguin's Impressionist pictures. Selling them supported her and the family for years, with the surprising result that Scandinavia had some good early Impressionist collections. And this is what I want to highlight here. There's so much more to go through, but I'm not going to deal with it here. We might deal with it in Van Gogh letters. It says here, his wife went back to Denmark, taking their 5 children. So it seems like his wife left him. It's like he lost all his money and his wife said, I've had enough of you. I'm abandoning you. I'm out of here, right? What does it say here in terms of Paul Gauguin on Wikipedia? What does it say in terms of his biography? Marriage. Let's go to marriage. Can you guys see that? It says he married a Danish woman. And then it says by 1884, Gauguin had moved with his family to Copenhagen, Denmark, where he pursued a business career as a tarpaulin salesman. It was not a success. So I'm a little bit confused here. I thought it said the stock market crash wiped him out, and then his wife went back to Denmark. Huh? And then what did he do? Alone, down and out in Paris, Gauguin hit rock bottom. Pasting up posters for 5 francs a day got him a rail ticket to France's wildest and cheapest corner, Brittany. Authentic is a word Gauguin used often, and it's no coincidence, blah, blah, blah. I'm a little confused here. Isn't this guy who wrote Gauguin's biography a little selective with reality? I mean, let's go through it again. His wife went back to Denmark, taking their 5 children. And then I think it says alone down and out in Paris. It seems like he stayed in Paris. His wife left him and went to Denmark, right? But here it says in 1884, Gauguin moved with his family to Copenhagen, Denmark, where he pursued a business career as a tarpaulin salesman. It was not a success. That's not in this biography. A little bit mischievous, wouldn't you say? And then there's another narrative, also from the Times. So this is an article. Where is this? There's an article in the Times, right? The Times, Sex and Syphilis, Paul Gauguin is not the bad boy that we think he is, right? Well, this is from the same publication, right? What's the date of this? Just the other day, September 1st, 2024. Here's another one, also from the Times, same publication. And it's from September 28, 2019, 5 years ago. Let's not pretend Paul Gauguin was nice. He was a jerk. So can you see how it's like amnesia? 5 years ago, he's a bad guy. 5 years later, let's write a book about it, but let's make the book about what a great guy he was, right? And I'm just going to go very briefly through this article. I mean, the right way to do it is to go exhaustively through each article, highlight all the main points, and then go exhaustively through the other one and highlight the main points. We just don't have time to do that. I do think it's really interesting how you can have these two different scenarios, and that's why I say, which one is more probable? Which one is reality? Which one is anchored in the truth and which one isn't? And what I find so fascinating with this is you've got a alternative reality, not only for Vincent van Gogh, but also for Paul Gauguin. It's like crazy. It's like, what do we want to think about this artist? Okay, let's think that about him. No. What is the truth about this artist? And I'm not trying to sell Paul Gauguin's art or Vincent van Gogh's art. I just want to know what the F happened, right? Okay, just waiting to go live. Okay, cool. Personally, I think I prefer many of Paul Gauguin's art to Vincent van Gogh's, but I don't like the artist because I don't like the way he treated Van Gogh, and I don't like the way he kind of lived his life. Whereas I think of Van Gogh as a really wonderful spirit. Anyway, let's deal with this article briefly. And remind me if I forget to do this, we need to talk about a criminal element in Gauguin's backstory. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So this should really ring true. Listen to this. A young Tahitian girl, possibly Tehahamana, whom Paul Gauguin said he married when he was 13. So in his own version of events, Paul Gauguin's own words effectively said, yeah, I married her when she was 13. He was 43 or 44. Now, do I need to go any further than that to say, I think this guy was a real creep? Do I need to go any further, right? And so, yeah, you've got an article saying that's basically apologia. I don't think he's a bad boy. I think he was a good guy. And just because his teeth didn't have mercury in them, I don't think he had syphilis. I think he was, there's not enough evidence of that. And this article also minimizes the ears, and it says basically admits some people think Gauguin cut off Van Gogh's ear, but no, blah, blah, blah. He was a good friend to him. He wrote letters to him afterwards. It's the same kind of bullshit in that article. Anyway, he says, Paul Gauguin said he married her when she was 13. She's lying naked, face down on a bed. She looks straight at the artist, who at the time was 43 or 44. A hooded ghoul watches her. I was sitting next to my 13-year-old daughter, and I gently closed the book before she looked up and asked what I was examining. I needed to think about what I was looking at before answering any questions. Now, what I'm going to say is quite controversial. I understand that in the 1880s, things were a little bit different. Also, the age of consent in certain countries were different to what they are today. The age of consent has evolved over time, right? I would say today the age of consent is, if anything, higher than it's ever been, right? So that's definitely worth mentioning. But I think the flip side is worth thinking about as well. Is it normal for 43, 44-year-olds to be hanging out with or marrying 13-year-olds, right? I don't think that's normal. And what I think is even less normal is a married 43-year-old with 5 kids to be marrying, essentially committing bigamy. I mean, he's basically breaking the law in that sense. He's already married to somebody else, and then he marries this girl in Tahiti who doesn't actually know that he's already married. And if he was honest with the tribe and said, "Hey guys, yeah, I'm actually married to someone else. I just haven't properly gotten a divorce," which also tells you something about the kind of guy he is. He just leaves things undone. He doesn't, is not a very conscientious human being. They would have said, "Okay, well, we're not going to even allow this. We're not going to allow the choice. If we really knew what was going on with you, you wouldn't be even a candidate for this sort of thing, right?" I'm just saying it's pretty incredible that you've got one article saying, "You know what, I actually think he was quite a good guy. He wasn't so bad." And in the same publication, you've got another article saying, I've got to close the book because what if my daughter looks at this and I've got to explain it. And then the writer goes on to say, we had a couple of great father and daughter outings to exhibitions over the summer. And so this father, the guy who wrote this article, is like, how do I explain Gauguin to my daughter? I mean, this guy is the pits. And he said, the big show at the Tate Britain of Van Gogh, with whom Gauguin had such a turbulent friendship. Yet in the age of Me Too and that person, and when there's a renewed soul searching over Europe's imperial past, would my daughter want to go and see an exhibition featuring pictures of that? Would I want to take her? And so this person's kind of soul searching about, is this an artist I really want to even let my daughter know his story because it's so vile? Then he says, I hope you will, said Cornelia Homburg, co-curator of the exhibition, which is billed as the first to look specifically at Gauguin's portraits. Let's not pretend he's a nice guy. We know he was a jerk. But for me personally, as a historian, if important things in history have happened, I'm not willing to ignore them or say I'm not dealing with it because morally I don't like it. And then he says, but does that mean we have to look? She argues we should because Gauguin played a key role in the history of portraiture. And then what does he say? I'd so much like to share this with you, but I need to move on to the next thing. So, yeah, this is where he talks about the marriage. Gauguin was married to Mette Sophie Gad, a Danish woman with whom he had 5 children, but their marriage effectively ended, although they never divorced, in 1885 when he returned to Paris from Copenhagen. So now you've got a second source saying the same thing. I don't know what the source is here. I mean, I don't want to say that Wikipedia is the source, but basically in this version of events, they basically say that he basically implies that he just stayed in Paris and that she left him. It's a little bit economical with the facts, isn't it? He dedicated himself to painting full time and spent much of the rest of the decade in Brittany. And I think I'm going to just end here. A voyage to Martinique with Laval in 1887 was his first formative encounter with the exotic. Bear in mind, the incident was 1888, the following year, laying the ground trip for his trips to Tahiti. But first he spent 2 intense months in 1888 with Van Gogh in the Yellow House in all, which had become the stuff of legend, countless books and films. Let's just see what he says about that. It all ended very badly with a huge row, after which Gauguin fled back north, and Van Gogh, who was mentally unraveling, so in his version of events, cut off much of his left ear. Van Gogh had lured Gauguin south with the promise that he would be the master, but Gauguin arrived to find the Dutchman had matured into a formidable painter. For those of you who followed Van Gogh letters, you know how Gauguin led Van Gogh along in terms of, I might be coming, maybe I'll come next week. I'm not really sure what I want to do. And then the moment of the incident where Van Gogh almost bled to death, the artist cut and ran. He was like gone the next day. I mean, Van Gogh literally almost died. I mean, when they found him the next day, they thought he had died. His bed was just soaked in blood, and Gauguin was out of there the next day. That doesn't seem like a very kind or conscientious. I wouldn't think of that person as a friend. And let's just end off by looking at what this author says about the incident briefly. Sue Prideaux. It's interesting that it's a woman. It's a woman finding him acceptable, whereas in the other article, it's a man with a daughter finding him unacceptable. So I just want to see if I can find that. So here it is. Can you guys see that? 9 weeks painting together in 1888 was fruitful artistically, but Vincent's growing mania culminated in the severing of his ear. Gauguin is sometimes accused, so look at that. Gauguin is sometimes accused of cutting it off. So this is acknowledged here, right? It's not like I'm the only person in the world who thinks that this is what really happened. Even an apologist for Gauguin is saying, yeah, there's some people who think that that's possible. And then he says, but the evidence doesn't stack up. Well, actually, part of the evidence is that Gauguin owned swords, and there were swords in the house, and they were his, and he asked for them afterwards. Gauguin left so quickly after the incident, he had to write back to Van Gogh and say, hey, do you mind sending me my swords? Why would Van Gogh say, I'm not really ready to do that right now, if those swords had nothing to do with what happened to him? The other thing is, cutting off your ear with a sword is much easier to explain if somebody misses it and dices it off than trying to saw it off with a razor blade or a knife. Anyway, the first person Vincent asked for in hospital was Gauguin. I don't know if that is a sign of Gauguin's innocence. You know, if Gauguin had attacked him or injured him, why did you do this to me, kind of thing. Or even if he didn't remember what happened, can you tell me what happened, kind of thing. And then, so he says his first letter, full of affection, was written to Gauguin. I found it, I don't know if you guys would agree with me, those who covered Van Gogh letters. I don't think his first letter was full of affection. It was sort of filled with sarcasm, wasn't it? It was filled with kind of a bit of self-deprecating humor and a little bit of bitterness. Do you remember that? Up to Vincent's death, his many letters both to Gauguin and to his brother never blamed Gauguin, but Van Gogh never blamed anyone. Van Gogh never blamed anyone for what was going on. Van Gogh never virtually didn't sell a single painting in his life. He did actually sell one. He didn't blame anyone for that. He never blamed anything for that. He was just like, well, the struggle continues. you know, sometimes as a YouTube creator, I get quite frustrated, and it's tempting to blame someone, to blame this creator that stole your thunder, or your audience, or yourself. I don't know. But Van Gogh didn't blame anyone. He was like, you know what, I need to keep working hard. Basically, just I'm trying to understand art, and let's keep at it, kind of thing. And wow, look how beautiful the colors are over there and over there. Anyway, he goes on to say, periodically, Vincent's letters propose they live together again. Long after Vincent's death, when Gauguin was living in Polynesia, he sent to France for sunflower seeds, planted them, and painted them in memory of my gentle friend Vincent. Again, very much apologia, but what this doesn't acknowledge was when Van Gogh died, like shortly after his death, Gauguin said something really heartless. He said, yeah, well, he was crazy. And you said, yeah, well, he was nuts. He was always nuts to begin with. Also, Gauguin didn't go to Vincent's funeral, and it was up in the north of France where Gauguin himself was. Not very nice. Definitely not very nice. And so I want to end off by touching on a criminal aspect that you may not know about in terms of Paul Gauguin. You might say, well, none of this is elevated to a criminal level. Gauguin may have been a jerk, he may have been an arsehole, but he wasn't a criminal. Well, have a look at this. Remember we talked about Jackie Peterson and the fact that her father was murdered, and the fact that her mother basically gave her up for adoption, and that Jackie gave two of her biological children up for adoption. And then what did Scott do when his wife was pregnant? Did he also want to get rid of his progeny like his mother did, right? It's a question. And so the same thing applies here. Is there something in Gauguin's backstory that's not very nice, that's actually criminal, that's actually giving us some idea of possible criminal psychology? What do you think the answer is? Just hypothetically, if we're doing Bayesian theory, what do you think subjectively the answer could be? What do you think the answer could be? That there might be something criminal in his backstory, his family backstory, or no, that there's not? What do you think the answer is? So I'm back on the Wikipedia page, and we are looking at and there's actually, I don't know if you can see it, there are the words attempted murder. Can you see that? So I'm going to just make this super large so you can see it and do that. And this is just the generic story of Gauguin, and look what we're dealing with. We're dealing with just a Wikipedia page, and we're dealing with, he was born in Paris in 1848 amidst a revolutionary year. He's born in a time of unrest and violence. In 1850, Gauguin's family settled in Peru, where he experienced a privileged childhood that left a lasting impression on him. So he was quite a spoiled brat, to put it mildly. Later, financial struggles led them back to France. That's where he received a formal education. Now I want to deal with this part. Okay, now we're dealing with biography, family history, and early life. Do you think there's going to be any criminal aspect in there? So that was his mother, and that's his grandmother. And we really want to be talking about his grandmother. Remember, Scott Peterson's grandfather was murdered, and his grandmother gave his own mother up for pretty much for adoption. Not adoption, put her into a Catholic school that was where she never really saw her daughter. So here it is. Gauguin was born in Paris to Clovis Gaugain and Aline Chazal in that year. Okay. Here it is. Gauguin's mother was the 22-year-old daughter of André Chazal, an engraver. So his grandfather was a kind of an artist, and Flora Tristan, an author and activist in early socialist movements. Their union ended when André assaulted his wife and was sentenced to prison for attempted murder. So his own grandfather was sentenced to prison for attempted murder of his grandmother. And so you're going to tell me that there's not a bone in his body, there's not a fiber of his being that isn't similarly criminal. When his own grandfather attacked his grandmother, resulting in him being charged, convicted, and going to prison. His own grandfather was a convicted criminal. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Have a look at that. So can you see how that kind of puts the whole, maybe he wasn't such a bad guy, into a bit of a different context. I'd love to know, I mean, I haven't read this biography, but I'd love to know whether the author mentioned that part. If you had to guess subjectively, would you say that it was mentioned? I would imagine a biography would go into that kind of detail. So, just to me, it's fascinating how you have, one narrative in 2024, a couple of days ago. We may have got the bad boy artist wrong. Maybe not. Maybe we didn't get him wrong. And then there's this one. Let's not pretend Paul Gauguin was nice. In the same publication, separated by about 5 years. And it just shows you how amnesia creeps in. You know the reality, or you have the possession of certain facts 5 years ago, and then 5 years later you've kind of forgotten about it. Well, let's revise history and just come up with a different version of it and sell a book while we're at it. No. Maybe let's stick to the facts and stay anchored in events and not have reality go like on a roller coaster, right? Okay, so that is it from me. This has been quite a long live. I hope you guys have found it enjoyable. I'm going to end off by giving you guys a sneak peek into what's coming soon. Is there anyone here who's been enjoying my coverage of JonBenet Ramsey? Anyone that's been watching it and been finding it interesting? Because in the same way that you can think about Paul Gauguin and Vincent van Gogh, you can say that's ancient history. That ancient history is still being revised and changed and altered and rewritten and thought about in different. In other words, the reality of what happened in the past is still being conjured and it's still like unsettled. It's still, do we want him to be a good guy now and then let's have an exhibition, or let's concentrate on that aspect. Maybe that wasn't so bad, and maybe we misinterpreted this or that, and let's have another exhibition while we're at it. Think about that to do with Paul Gauguin and Vincent van Gogh and this one and that one, and think about how our political leaders today are choosing and making up and inventing their reality in real time, just like this. Like if I say today, this is what I stand for, that's what I stand for. Really? So I can stand for something one day and something else another day. And all I'm relying on is your bad memory. But what if I can show you that there's no precedent for that? And that's where I think human beings are really weak, is that we don't seem to anchor ourselves in evidence. We don't seem to remember what was said today sufficiently. We can really easily become forgetful. Even with the Bayesian yacht, someone will say, you know what? I think the yacht took 2 minutes to sink. 2 minutes. And then that gets repeated over and over, and then that becomes reality. And there are all these different realities with the Bayesian yacht as well. That the mast is broken. There are sketches of the mast broken underwater. The mast's not broken. So do we just casually make up information as we go along? If we do that, we're living in a very dangerous world where any of us can be manipulated by opportunists, people telling you what is convenient, easy, simple to hear. Is that Timmy on a rocket? Yeah, it is. Okay, so Tracy Bell, thanks a lot. Thanks for that. So this is going to be the next video on this channel. You guys ready? What is Patsy saying about the grand jury? And that was on Larry King. And I've already written a script. It's really fascinating. Now, if you think about it, can you ever remember Patsy actually saying the words grand jury, right? Can you remember what the Ramseys said in their book about the grand jury? Because they wrote quite extensively about it. Can you remember what words they used when they spoke about the grand jury? Also, has John ever mentioned the grand jury? Can you remember when John mentioned the grand jury? And the grand jury is a seminal moment in the John Benet Ramsey story, and it's also whitewashed right out of the media narrative. You'll never hear court TV talking about it. You'll never hear people covering the Ramsey story. I'm talking about the Sun and the Daily Mail and whoever's interviewing John Ramsey, or even at CrimeCon. I just don't think the grand jury thing is dealt with in a lot of detail, right? And so what is fascinating about this is just after the grand jury verdict, Patsy Ramsey mentions it, but in the context of nobody really knows what really happened there. I mean, it would take 13 years for the truth to come out about what really happened. And so I'm going to be sharing this with you guys in the next video. So that's the cover. What is Patsy saying about the grand jury? It should really be quite interesting. So I want to encourage you guys to watch it. I'm going to be playing a little clip out of that and probably playing it 5, 6, 7 times. And although it's just a couple of seconds, every time you watch it, you see something more, and I don't know, it really is quite fascinating. Okay. So that's it from me. I must say, I don't know why. I don't know how creators do lives. Like, some of them do it every single day. I don't know how they do it. Like, I kind of dread it. I sort of feel like I need to be prepared, and I don't know if I'm gonna anyway. And I don't know how they do it. I really don't know how they do it. But I keep getting told by YouTube, you need to be doing more lives. Okay, I'll get the message. And I know it's important to connect with you guys. At the very least, you guys remember that I'm here and I get to interact directly with you. And I think that is important. So the True Crime Live updates are continuing at this point every Monday. I didn't do it yesterday because there was a holiday. But I do want to encourage you, if you come across a new story, whether it's Chris Watts or Madeline McCann or John Benet Ramsey or just the most current case of Sarah Boone, you're welcome to send it my way on X. I'm at crimerocket, or on Instagram, or on YouTube, or in a comment, or just let me know in a comment, and I'll add it to the roster of cases we can look at. Often I see really interesting cases and articles that I really want to share with you, but I sort of feel like I only have time to do this case today. I'm only going to do this case today or that case today. And then there are like 5 articles that I'm like, wow, I really wish I could share what I think about it. And the Madeline Soto example that I gave you, you know, I've obviously listened to some of the interviews as well. I just felt like I can't really, I've got so much on my plate. I can't really deal with this right now. But if I could deal with it briefly, then I would do that. And so that's really what this is for, to try and take a lot of the stuff and just deal with it one by one in one go. But if there's something you want me to comment on or address or whatever, then let me know in the comments to this video, but also to any video, and then we'll definitely deal with it. Yeah, not enough hours in a day. Hedy B says, I like your coverage of many cases in a live. I really don't always have time for lives. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Stephanie. So I just want to quickly thank all those who gave super chats: Suzanne Hine, Pika Pakanko, Liesl Maguire, Kimchi, you've been a member for 7 months. MH 1979 Odense DK, thank you. Sandra Halford and Maria Sierra, I really appreciate it. I've got some really interesting news to share with you about just some events that are going to be playing out in October, but I'll let you guys know closer to the time. Okay, let's look at the last couple of comments. Live save you time, yeah. Thanks, Christina. Stephanie says, reach out to Nick. I do when I have a question on a random case. So also let me know if you want me to dig into Bayesian inference and statistics and all the theory around that. It's definitely quite interesting. One thing I've meant to do that I just haven't got round to doing, remember I was covering Rex Heuermann. Well, I've got this book, and Mindhunter comes up in the John Benet Ramsey mythos, in the fabric of that case. And this book also comes up in Rex Heuermann. And so I've really been itching to deal with this in terms of both those cases as well. Just haven't quite got round to it. Okay, let's look at your last comments here. Tanny says more statistics is appreciated. KJ says no write-off from the first interview. I knew. Okay. Hedy B says, I'm interested in Madeline's mother's perspective. I just can't really sit here and play, I don't know, 40 hours of audio, not 40 hours, 40 minutes of audio. There's other audio that goes on even longer. Because that'll end up being, just for that, will end up being a live stream as long as this. But I have thought of just giving you the highlights in the same way that I've done these videos, where you just get a little soundbite, discuss it, next soundbite, discuss it. So I might do that. So I might do that at some point. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I appreciate it. What I find so fascinating and disturbing is this whole revisionist thing, where you come back to the Scott Peterson case and it all relies on amnesia, right? It's like, did Scott not know about the burglars at the time that his trial was happening? Did his lawyers not know about it? you just don't tend to think back to that extent, right? I do have a Patreon channel, patreon.com/TCRS. I've got books, short books on the $5 tier, and then longer books on the $10 tier, narrated by me. So they're audiobooks. They're about 22 audiobooks on Patreon. If you really want to get your money's worth, become a member for 1 month and go through 10 audiobooks. So that's pretty good value. The best tier to be on is the $2 tier. I'll put pretty much 2 or 3 posts a day on the $2 tier. So if you want to join, please do. Yeah, definitely. Heather So says, thanks for the interesting live. Have a great evening. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Not much more to say, except I'm finding the Bayesian yacht really interesting. I want to encourage you and invite you to watch some of the videos if you haven't already. So definitely check it out. Okay. Also, thanks very much to the mods, Stephanie and Chelsea. Thanks a lot for manning the fort. It looks like there's mostly good behavior. So thanks a lot for that. I'm still reeling from walking my dog this evening. A Alsatian came out of the dark and was like savagely barking at me. I thought it was going to attack me for a moment. This dog has actually attacked my dog a couple of times. So that was definitely a low light of the day. But you kind of got to wonder, what do you do in a situation like that? Because the owner doesn't do anything. The owner doesn't put the dog on a leash. Even though her dog has attacked my dog and attacked so many other dogs, what can you do? There's no authority that really takes control of this. I think the only thing you can do is, if you are attacked, if you are injured, then the owner is liable in that respect. So what do? Just wait until you're attacked by the dog? I don't know. It's definitely something that is bugging me. In America, if a dog attacks another dog, what can you do? I mean, you don't call the police, do you? You call the SPCA. I just don't know what you do. Anyway, fortunately, Timmy is okay, and so am I. Can you find a new place to walk? Yeah, I suppose I could. A lot of people actually are. A lot of other people's dogs have been attacked, and so they've left that area. But I don't think that's a solution. Yeah, I mean, that's just not a very nice situation. Anyway, on that unhappy note, does anyone want to see Timmy? Shall I quickly call him? Timmy, come. Come, boy. Come, boy, come. Hey, come. I hear something. He's just shaking himself. He's like, wow, I had to wake up. Okay, come, boy. Come say hello. He's stretching. Come, boy. Yes, Timmy is still looking quite dapper. I think you'll agree. He's got a bit of a Batman look, doesn't he? Look how black he is around his face. When I got him as a puppy, he was actually completely black with white paws and I think a white little thing on his tail. And I don't know, kind of was like great because I thought he would, because the black schnauzers are so, I don't know, I find them really handsome, but unfortunately turned into a typical salt and pepper. Although I must say his temperament is by no means typical. Timmy is such a assertive, on a mission schnauzer. It's actually unreal. Hey? He's so much more cuddly when he's shaved. I don't know. You can see his eyes. When his hair's longer, it's almost like a sheep, and so it's just less. I don't know. It's just less. You can't really feel. You can't really feel him as much when he's got this thick, kind of woolly hair. So it's always nice when he's had a bit of a groom. And you can see his eyes, which I think make a difference. Okay. He is a distinguished gentleman, isn't he? Do you guys agree he's the most authentic schnauzer in true crime? You are, hey, Timmy. You are the most authentic schnauzer. Huh? Yeah. Okay. Okay, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me. I wanted to end on a bit more of a positive note, and I think we have. Guys, I hope you have a good rest of your week, and I will see you guys next time. Ciao.